How can someone be relatable and rich at the same time? Having this online perception of, wow, she's just like me, yet belonging to a wealth class that less than 1% of people ever even get to be a part of. It creates this paradox between being relatable and being authentic. Let's look at someone like the Kardashians, for example. You can make the argument that they are extremely authentic. It's just who they authentically are is extremely out of touch and not relatable at all. But let's compare that to someone like an Emma Chamberlain, who is completely self-made. She blew up being known for this sense of relatability, making vlogs going to her high school, her local coffee shop. She wasn't afraid to be real and embarrass herself on camera. Her lifestyle was extremely relatable, and people were drawn to that. Yet as her career has evolved, her lifestyle is no longer relatable. What was once just filming in her bedroom is now filming in a multi-million-dollar house featured on Architectural Digest. A "What Am I Wearing" video used to be clothes from Urban Outfitters or H&M. Now it is Louis Vuitton, Miu Miu, and Aritzia, which was sent to her for free, and she is a global ambassador of. Filming her morning coffee routine is now filming her making a coffee from a brand that she is the CEO and owner of. And if she were to go back to making these videos like she used to be more relatable to her audience, it would be completely inauthentic to who she actually is now. And she would get hate for not being real. It is a paradox where you're damned if you do and damned if you don't. Relatable and authentic are the two most common buzzwords in the industry, but is it even possible for someone to be successful, relatable, and authentic at the same time? Or is the internet just holding people, especially women, to a completely impossible standard? In this week's episode of Nikki at Night, we will analyze and discuss this paradox of relatability. Discuss a few examples, and find out if there even is a solution. This video was inspired to me by a creator named @CharlieChats, and specifically this line she said in her video, "I'm just like you, but way richer." And that one sentence made me think about this topic so much because it is so true and such an interesting way to articulate this phenomenon. So please go and give her a follow because she's still a small creator, and this one video completely inspired it. And I love the way she does her research and everything. You should definitely go and check her out. And I want to give her credit for that amazing quote. Welcome back to the show. My name is Nikki Reardon. I am your host. And guys, we are number 29 on the music podcast charts. Let's go, baby. And we are number 34 in the UK. We have infiltrated the British media. Shout out to all the hot British men watching this. Please hit on me. I'm begging you. And follow the podcast. Please give it a 5-star rating. We are on a mission. We are on a goal. We can hit top 10 by the end of the year. I think it is so doable. And please remember, if you're listening, give it a 5-star rating. 5 stars is so important for charting. It sucks that it matters less about followers and views. It matters a lot more about ratings. And 10 seconds of your time can have the chance to completely change my life. So thank you. Also, follow me on Instagram. I just made a broadcast channel for this podcast that we're kind of just using a Discord, so we can discuss the topics, discuss the episodes. I've also been posting polls. If you guys want to vote on what the next episode should be, you can do that. It's so fun. It's completely free, and we love community. Going back into this week's topic, this paradox of relatability. And when I think about being relatable on the internet, I kind of think of it like this spectrum of relatable to aspirational. People like the Kardashians or Anara Smith, for an example, are on the complete right side, this aspirational side where I feel they're not even really trying to be relatable. Nara Smith is such a perfect example of this, making sourdough from scratch, making cereal from scratch. It's so ridiculous. And her videos are so intentionally buttoned up that it gives you this feeling when you're watching her of oh, I wish I could be like that. I want to be like that. Or the Kardashians even, it's they are so crying on a private jet. And that is not relatable at all. But the reason that people like them is because you feel this semblance of wow, I wish I had that lifestyle. Whereas relatability is the opposite end of the spectrum. And, I would equate a very early Emma Chamberlain as the poster child of this. I also really just make a lot of references to Emma Chamberlain in this research because I think she really pioneered this style of content, honestly, from everything, the topics of the videos, the editing style, it felt there was almost 5 years of internet and creators who were all just like trying to be like Emma Chamberlain, which is super interesting because while it was being relatable and authentic to Emma and who she was, it created this wave of like aspiration of other creators trying to be like Emma Chamberlain or edit their videos like Emma Chamberlain, which is super interesting to think about too, how like, like maybe part of this paradox is that relatability doesn't exist once you really reach some semblance level of success, because with success has to come some piece of admiration from someone developing a parasocial relationship from you. Like, I think that is really interesting phenomenon. And also, I think as your career develops, it is impossible not to move towards the right of the spectrum, like being more aspirational, right? Like, again, like it's just, even if she makes a very simple video, like just makes a video cooking in her house. Once upon a time, that was her parents' kitchen. Then it became, an apartment that she owned and lived in. Then it became maybe a house that she bought. And now it's like this $1 million mansion, like regardless, even if the exact same video word for word was the same, like when you make your lifestyle the focus of the content, as you become more successful, your lifestyle becomes aspirational by default, which I think is super interesting. But what also fascinates me is kind of like creators who land in the middle of this. And I don't really know where to like place them. Like two examples that really popped in my mind was like a Monet McMichael and a Brittany Broski. So like, they're definitely, like Monet, for example, is definitely aspirational in the sense of like most of her content is very beauty, fashion, and lifestyle. And people want to follow her makeup routines or, pay attention to what she's wearing because they want to look like her. Like they love her, but also I think her personality in the content itself is very relatable. You know what I mean? Like the way she'll just like post videos of her like dancing with music on, like while she's like doing her hair or whatever. Like that is very like, it evokes the feeling of like, oh, like that could be my best friend. Like I wish I was doing that. Like when we were getting ready to go out together, you know what I mean? Or another one that was interesting to me is like a Brittany Broski, where she started by being definitely like super on this relatable side, right? Like she was working at a bank in Texas and got her start by being like a kombucha meme. But now if you were to look at her lifestyle in a vacuum, it is most certainly aspirational. Like she is signed to the largest talent agency in the world. She has 2 fully produced shows, interviews celebrities, has even hosted red carpets, yet to me still feels kind of more towards this relatable side of the spectrum. And my theory is that it's really because when somebody has a craft outside of their content, instead of just their lifestyle being their content, you can relate to the craft. So like with someone like Brittany, it's comedy, right? Like she is a comedian. And although her hosting a red carpet might not be relatable, her cracking a joke about a super niche, like chronically online reference or being a fangirl, like you can feel relatable to that because that might be the type of joke you would crack with your friend in your apartment dorm room. You know what I mean? Like that is something that was super interesting to me. Or also when thinking about this is how like music artists, like huge music artists always feel relatable and aspirational at the same time, because obviously they are like mega stardom and rich beyond belief. So they are aspirational in that way, but they can feel relatable because the themes of the music, right? Like if Taylor Swift writes a song about, heartbreak or whatever, like anyone who has gone through a heartbreak or gone through a relationship or had a bad breakup can feel related to that. Like that feels relatable. And that's something that, again, I think is super interesting, is how it can have an aspirational lifestyle, but if they have some sort of craft or medium or art form that can still be relatable, that is when you see, these people like hit these peaks and also I think like intersect and also not run into a lot of the backlash that an Emma Chamberlain kind of ran into later on, which we'll discuss. And another interesting thing I think about authenticity and being aspirational is people don't care if you're aspirational as long as you're real. I think like the perfect example of this is like the Kardashians and Kanye West. Like they are notoriously bad people. And everybody has always known that, yet they have these massive fandoms because it is like, in order to be a fan, you kind of have to know that and accept that. And even when they do these things that are so out of touch, like Kim Kardashian crying on a private jet, or Kendall Jenner, like not knowing how to like cut the cucumber properly, it's like so unrelatable that people find it funny and they clown on them and they make fun of them. And it's interesting because that is real. Like, that's who they are. Who they are is out of touch. And it's funny that people don't care if you're out of touch as long as you're upfront about it. Like, I thought that was a super interesting thing. Again, like another example is Kanye West being famous for so long. And while I adamantly dislike him and he's blatantly anti-Semitic, homophobic, was a Trump supporter, like, it is fascinating that he's always been a bad person. Like, he has been controversial since day one. But if your fandom like expects that from you, it's fine. And then when you compare that to someone like what happened with Lizzo, for example, I think was so interesting to me, was it's about this gap in expectation versus reality. People very quickly canceled Lizzo, and there was everywhere, and everybody, like shamed her and all this stuff when there was that situation with her backup dancers and like fat shaming her backup dancers and being like overtly sexual towards them, because she had built an entire brand off of being a very proud plus-size woman, not being afraid of that, not being afraid to embrace her sexuality. So when you find that she is doing that shaming to these other people, it was this gap in expectation versus reality. And it's interesting that people care less about the quality of the person and care more about this gap in this expectation versus reality. Is like such an interesting phenomenon of the internet to me. And another interesting one that I thought about recently was like what's happened with Chappell Roan when she was like complaining about, like fans really kind of stalking her or harassing her in ways that made her uncomfortable, and comparing that to like a Doja Cat, because Doja Cat, while I absolutely love her music, has like notoriously shit on her fans like a multitude of times. She calls them weird. She's like, don't come up with stand names for me. She goes on live and like makes fun of them. And people don't really care so much about it anymore. Because if you're a fan of her, you kind of just accept that, right? Whereas what happened with Chappell Roan and how much that blew up when she made that video and all these articles that were written about it and how many views it got was because people were really idolizing her for being this underdog story and being this, 10 years to overnight success story. And when there was a slight shift in the expectation of who people thought she was, because again, you don't know her, you have a parasocial relationship with her, when there was a slight rift in that from the expectation versus reality, the like blowback was immense, and even more than, someone like a Doja who has done that on multiple occasions. So again, that is like such an interesting phenomena of this paradox to me, and this paradox of being relatable is I think people really care about reality, and this like who they think you are versus who you actually are really is the most important thing. And I don't really think I see people talk about or analyze that as much. Which brings me to the stuff that happened with Emma Chamberlain. And I personally love Emma. Like, she was one of the first, I think, people who really got me into YouTube in like 2016. And I really watched her rise like from the beginning. Like, I remember that. I remember when she made that video, like getting 10 coffees in a day, you know what I mean? And like, that was her content. But she got into a lot of like backlash and criticism, specifically once she like really hit this peak of like now going to these designer fashion shows, but she's literally like getting her makeup done and having somebody like feed her by hand, and people really disliked that. And I think this is also really like exemplified and expounded upon when she had like made comments sometimes about how she like hated that influencers were going to the Met Gala, and it's like, girl, you are literally the host of the Met Gala because you're an influencer. Like, you're one of the first people that were allowed there. And that's a really cool thing, Like, it's fascinating to me how much we love to shit on Nepo babies and people who, came from money or wealth or status and got their place that way. Yet we will also shit on somebody who is like a content creator and completely self-made. You know what I mean? Like, whether you love or hate Emma Chamberlain, you cannot deny that, like, she did not come from a famous family. Like, she did it by posting videos on the internet in her bedroom herself and eventually got to that level. So what's frustrating is to see somebody open the door for themselves, then shut it behind them, I think is really, like, when people had a problem. Honestly, when I had a problem, like, I think as like just like a viewer, I was like, okay, like, relax. Like, you gotta respect and have humility towards where you came from. And also, I think that this was really, really just kind of bizarre. However, I think it is super important to acknowledge that people change and people evolve, and that is natural and a good thing, right? Like, as you age and your career develops and you begin to metamorphosize as a person, like, the caterpillar does not look like the butterfly, and that is a good thing. The caterpillar is not meant to look like the butterfly. However, I think what people had an issue with is when, somebody becomes this big, beautiful butterfly and starts shitting on caterpillars. You know what I mean? Saying like, we shouldn't let any of these people in here, or those people shouldn't be willing to enter their cocoon, that is where, again, this gap in expectation versus reality came from. But again, it boils down to this point of like, becoming aspirational is almost inevitable when your life is perceived in this way. And it's, I think, also especially fascinating we see with these like lifestyle creators, because their content is their lifestyle. Like, again, comparing this back to like a musician, for example, like an Ariana Grande was someone who experienced a lot of like criticism earlier this year for being a homewrecker and leaving her husband and then getting with a guy who was like, also had a wife and a newborn, and she experienced so much criticism. Then she released an album. People really liked the album, and I have not heard a single person call her a homewrecker since. Like, that criticism completely dissipated because people love her craft. They love her art. And I think the reason that these lifestyle girlies really get a lot of attention or criticism in this regard is because their lifestyle is their craft. So every single thing that they do is put under this microscope, and those changes are analyzed and seen in real time, like literally on a weekly basis. And I also think maybe like Emma really pulling away from the internet kind of ended up hurting her. Like, I think it helped people perceive her as a celebrity, and, like not being as readily available in the way that other creators are. However, I think it did, give this sense of being out of touch, right? Like, I made it to this level I've been trying to get to, and now I don't feel the need to keep up with and entertain and communicate with this community of people that are the only reason I got there in the first place. Is there a solution to the paradox? I don't really know. I don't know if somebody can be successful and relatable and authentic. It's almost like you have to pick one in a weird way. Like, if you reach a certain level of success and you talk about the things that you're doing, that is authentic, but it's no longer relatable. Or if you want to be relatable, you have to not be authentic and not fully share your life and things about yourself. And I think that is super interesting when there is so much talk, like, oh my God, every fucking meeting I'm in is like relatable, authentic, authenticity, originality, relatability. And it's fascinating to me that upon further analysis, I'm not sure those things are even possible. Or maybe what it really is, having like a respect and admiration for where you came from. That's the most important thing, Like, another random creator example that just popped in my mind, guy with a movie camera, Reese, and how he blew up initially for being a PA. He was like behind the scenes on these sets of movies and stuff, and was like filming it and posting it to TikTok at the time. And now he is like on red carpets and interviewing these people, and that's all he does now, right? Like, he's not behind the scenes anymore now. Like, he is talent holding the microphone. But there is this clear like love of film, and I think also that it showed that maybe he like paid his dues in some way that feels relatable to people so they can relate to where they came from, but aspire to where they are now. And that is how, like both of those things can coexist at the same time. This paradox of it, like another random example that I had always thought of was like, do you guys remember that Axel Weber guy when he was making videos about having like the tiniest apartment in New York City and just like really living this like struggle lifestyle, like buying like a bag of like potatoes from a random street vendor. And he grew like 4 million followers on TikTok. This is like very early TikTok. And I remember watching this and thinking to myself at the time, like, I love this story and this is so cool for this guy. But like the second he gets one brand deal with like 40 million followers, that's like upwards of 40 or 50 grand. So then him living in this apartment becomes a choice. So if he wants to still be relatable to these people and continue this narrative of content that he's built, he has to lie to them. And if he doesn't, and he, like makes these videos of like moving into a new place or whatever, blah, 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 to be authentic, then he is no longer relatable. Is there an answer to being relatable? I don't know. Can someone be just like you when they're observantly rich and wealthy? I don't know. Maybe it's about feeling relatable to a part of them, their art form or their craft, yet aspirational to the success and the milestones they've achieved. But let me know what you guys think. I don't know. I don't think this one has like a super clear answer, but that's also why I thought about it so deeply and why I wanted to make it the topic of this week's episode. But thank you all so much. Subscribe, give it 5 stars, follow me on Instagram, join our little group chat. It's so much fun. And I love you all so much. I'll see you next week. Bye.